Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko taranake te papa te whenua. Kei te noho o ke o te pote a naene I raru I te maru o Kaitahu. Ko whakapunake te maunga, ko te Wairoa te awa. Ko Ngāti Kahungunu, rawa ko Ngāti Parau nā iwi. Ko takatimu te waka, ko kahununu te tangata. Ko Scout Barbour-Evans aho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Scout. I was born in a wee town called Stratford up in Taranaki, where all the streets are named after bits of Shakespeare. I come from Ngāti Kahungunu ki te Wairoa, an iwi on the east coast of New Zealand's North Island. And today I'm going to tell you all how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and totally politicised. In March 2010, I opened the door of my maths classroom and I stepped inside. It was a lunchtime. It was a beautiful sunny day. And my friends and I sat around a table and listened in on a meeting. I was a student at Otago Girls' High School. Yeah, we all still thought I was a girl back then. And that day, I joined my high school's Amnesty International group. It was my first ever extracurricular that wasn't the choir, and I threw myself straight into helping to organise and learning the ropes. Every year in schools across New Zealand, Amnesty International groups work towards one common goal: Freedom Challenge Week. In 2010, we were protesting for the release of a group of youth activists in Myanmar who had been imprisoned. Our group somehow got permission from our really conservative school principal to spend the whole day dressed in black. And we got to school early and we stood facing the school gates. And I remember standing near the music department, dressed totally in black, totally still and silently, and I think I had masking tape across my mouth. And we stood there until the bell rang. And then in our form classes, we did the spiel on why we were participating that day. And then we repeated that spiel in every single class we had that day, and did a speech in assembly too. Since that day, in 2010, I can count over 70 individual demonstrations that I have participated in. They've all had that general human rights direction to them. I went from Amnesty International to the marriage equality movement in Australia that's still going today, to protesting against Reclaim Australia, a neo-Nazi group, to coming home and protesting for better Dunedin hospital food and for access to mental health care and for the Dunedin hospital to be rebuilt, to protesting the TPPA because only 5 of the 29 chapters were actually about trade, and that's not much of a trade deal, more of a trade-off, to working behind the scenes in advocacy and lobbying and volunteering in pastoral care in the social services sector and working with former refugees. And I'm even training to work as a volunteer in the emergency response sector too. And I don't think I've ever really sat down since that day in March 2010 and had a break, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Throwing my entire life into looking after other people was the easiest decision I've ever made. And most of what I do is because I've had all of these really horrible experiences, and I refuse to allow the health sector, the social sector, the justice sector, the government, to put anyone else's lives at risk like they did mine. I want to use my really horrible experiences and to make them into something good for other people, because I can handle those feelings and other people's emotions, even when there are so many of them, when not many other people can. I definitely recognise that as a gift that I've been given somewhere in the trajectory of my life. And I'm really proud of myself for recognising that I have these tools and I can make a difference, even as a terrified 22-year-old disabled, marginalised, Māori, mentally ill, transgender, takatapui, queer, neurodivergent person who has survived rape and abuse and somehow suicide attempts too. Past my skin colour, I am not privileged in circumstance or wealth or health. And in a lot of sectors, I have very little credibility due to these identities that I cannot actually shed, ever. But I'm fighting for that credibility every single day. Last year, 2016, I ran for Dunedin Mayor and Council. I had an $85 campaign budget, and most of it went on $15 Facebook ads. The odds were stacked against me, and I was running against some long-established community leaders some who had had over 20 years, my whole lifetime, to build their networks and backgrounds. I came 180 votes away from election to City Council, and somehow I was hundreds of votes closer to election than some of these incredibly well-established community leaders. I was 14 places, an entire City Council, ahead of the only other person my age who had run, whose politics were polar opposite to mine, let alone his privileges. I did this at the same time as I graduated from a certificate in human services specialising in mental health and addiction support from right here at Otago Polytech, with a merit endorsement. 21 was an amazing year for me, and I don't think I'm ever going to forget it. At the same time, 21 was pretty tough and really rather isolating. I left yet another relationship that had turned toxic. I finally formally lost my eating disorder diagnosis, only to regain it. I had to learn how to handle the media with no training, and other than my best friend driving me to candidate forums, I had no one else in my campaign team. Facebook groups like Dunedin News and the Otago Daily Times comment section, and even the blog Whale Oil, became breeding grounds for hateful comments that were directed at me. And I have a bloody thick skin, but some of it really started to sting. What got increasingly difficult and actually ironic for me at times were the accusations of identity politics, a term no one on the left could or would explain for me, and the very centrist or right-wing community leaders who would try to claim that my politics are entirely self-serving and that I was in it to make my own life better, no one else's. After dedicating my life to making other people's lives okay, working myself to the bone despite massive fatigue and several months of compassion burnout too, it's a slap in the face to be told that somehow you are capitalising out of serving everybody else. And yeah, I capitalise off my own identities to push my politics, but that was never and has never been about me. I still don't really have an understanding of what identity politics is supposed to be. And I'm not convinced that anyone else does either. If you talk to someone on the left wing, it's political expression that comes purely from your experiences with a marginalised identity. And it's bad because some women aren't feminists, some gay people are racist. Essentially, being of a diverse identity does not guarantee that you can deal with the big issues. And to left-wing folk against identity politics, the big issue is classism. And that isn't wrong. Look at Caitlyn Jenner or Paula Bennett. But that doesn't mean we should be dismissing identity politics 100% as bad. It's still got its place. And to the right wing, identity politics is apparently bad too. It's PC gone mad. It's a millennial generation's me obsession, selfies are bad or something. To the right wing, identity politics is seen as selfish, which is bizarre because the right wing stands for a very individualist sort of a political agenda that privileges the upper classes and takes away the safeguards for marginalised identities. It's almost like we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But I think there's a solution. Our Westminster system of government comes from the days where white people were seen as genetically and intellectually superior to all people of colour, and men were the only people allowed to own property or vote. It comes from the time of spinsters who were seen as queer, because what woman in her right mind wouldn't want to marry a man and have children and more and devote her entire life to her husband until she dies in childbirth? It's outdated. And our social approaches to government are too. We still have a predominantly male, predominantly Pākehā government. We still have people in cabinet who represent issues they have never been affected by in their lives. And while that happens, kids with autism are struggling to access education. People with mental illnesses are totally unheard unless neurotypical people speak on our behalf. Migrants who work harder every single day than citizens do just to keep afloat and keep their communities going are facing racist policy after racist policy. Perhaps, somehow, there's an opportunity to change this situation. In a democratic society, it is imperative that we have a diverse representation in our political sphere. Just an offhand example, but 15.2% of New Zealand's population are Māori. Yet we are significantly underrepresented in local body government. You can't represent issues if you've never been affected by them in your life. I want ministers for health and mental health who have first-hand experience of the systems that they want to manage. I want a minister for disability who actually has a disability. Imagine that. How just a few years ago, the Australian government had Tony Abbott as the Minister for Women. What does Tony know about being a woman? Do you know why I became interested in politics? I realised how much of a difference I can make every single day. I still get thanked by strangers on the street for the work that I do. I still have the philosophy in my life that to survive, and for others to survive, I need to use these really horrible experiences and turn them into something good. And I cannot do that without using my own identities in my politics. My queerness, my poverty, my transness, my neurodivergency, my disabilities, my youth, my mental illness, my Māoriness, I cannot change any of these things about me. I cannot erase the experiences of marginalisation that I have gathered in my kete since I was a child. When these identities of mine get inconvenient, I cannot just take them off like I can a jersey on a hot day. I am stuck wearing that jersey of mine every single day, no matter how hot it gets. And the jersey gives me perspectives that those of you wearing t-shirts just don't get. Consider Materia Ture, who I am privileged enough to have sitting in the audience here with me today. As a young Māori woman, a single mother on the domestic purposes benefit, working tirelessly to feed her baby daughter and get her law degree, Materia had it pretty tough. She had family support, but it didn't stretch as far as it needed to. So Materia chose not to tell Work and Income that she had flatmates, because if she did, she would lose the financial ability to feed her child. And 10 years later, she became a Member of Parliament. A Member of Parliament who, until this year, no one knew had committed benefit fraud. New Zealanders were divided by the revelation. There was fury that she'd committed benefit fraud, and there was the avalanche of people who understood and knew what it was like to be on a benefit in New Zealand, and understood that Materia didn't just break the law for shits and giggles. She broke an unjust law, because if she didn't, she wouldn't be able to feed her child. She was recently forced by the media to resign from her position as co-leader of the Green Party, because 25 years ago she fed her child. When Materia and I have spoken about identity politics, she has responded to the idea of it being bad with derision. Materia's experiences have been shaped by both identity and class. And much like myself, she has brought her experiences into her politics to great success. Materia made her public statement about what she did to keep her daughter alive because of the same conviction that compelled me to become a publicly known mentally ill and transgender person. Statistically, those of marginalised identities are significantly more likely to live in poverty. The Youth 12 report, a report on the well-being of transgender youth in New Zealand, used the 2006 New Zealand deprivation measure to identify that 42.8% of transgender youth live in high deprivation. So that's 42.8% of transgender youth in New Zealand living in poverty. That is an absolutely alarming statistic. I am a transgender young person, and I live in poverty too. I know and understand the complications that come with being a trans person in poverty, with high medical needs and the reduced ability to get a paying job. And even if my class miraculously changes and I become financially stable, I will never be able to erase the experiences of marginalisation that I live through now. I am a walking intersection of marginalised identities living in the poverty class to boot. Statistics show that my poverty and my transness and my identities are intrinsically interlinked. I will proudly and fiercely stand in this world with my identities on my jersey sleeve, and I cannot drop them at whim. I want to leave this world better than when I arrived here. And the best way that I know how to do that is to use my experiences to make things better, to make a difference. As local Dunedin heroes 660 always say, don't forget your roots. Thank you.